You are already creating your life. Not someday, not when you finally feel confident, not when you heal enough, not when you have more time, right now. In the stories you repeat, in the meanings you assign, and what you expect, and what you rehearse. The question isn't whether you're creating. The question is, are you creating deliberately or accidentally? Hey, and welcome back, beautiful Shine Tribe, to soulSHINE, the Art of Becoming, in a companion episode called The Year I Stopped Waiting for My Life to Begin, The Science of Surrender. I shared what happened when I loosened my grip on certainty and on outcomes and on trying to perfectly engineer my becoming. And if you haven't heard that episode yet, it's episode 45. I will link it in the show notes if you want to have a little more context about this year of spiritual deepening and surrender and experimentation and the evolution of myself and how the origin stories of soulSHINE. So go listen to that one. But where we're coming off of that episode, talking a lot about surrender. And surrender then leads us to the next question. Once we loosen our grip and we're free to create, what do we deliberately actually want to create? And so today I want to talk to you and to have this conversation about deliberate creation, not mainstream manifestation. And if words like manifestation or energetics make you skeptical, that is totally fine. Keep your discernment. I'm not asking you to suspend critical thinking. We're going to talk about the science of expectancy effects, of mental rehearsal, of goal science, and all the measurable ways that our beliefs and our attention shape behavior, physiology, and lived experience. So, you know how we like it in here, part science, part mysticism. Depending on which way you look at it, they're two sides of the same coin. But when we're talking today about deliberate creation, I don't want you to just think like, oh, think positive and the universe delivers you a yacht. No, we are going to talk about the real ways that our expectations and our nervous systems, our imagination, and our actions literally shape the reality we participate in. So this is how we're going to walk through the episode. I'm going to first define deliberate creation, and then I'm going to tell you a real story from work that was the inspiration behind this. And then we'll, as usual, weave in some of the neuroscience and psychology. And then we'll end with a practical invitation that you can practice this week. Because one of the things I really care about is not that you just come here and consume and contemplate these ideas, scroll the ideas. I want you to live with them. I want you to leave this place transformed. My becoming and my evolution is my purpose. And for anyone who wants to walk that journey with this community, my purpose is dedicating this space to helping others do that too. So let's start off with deliberate creation. Most of us don't consciously create our lives. And I know you've heard this all before. You know the numbers on how much we operate from automatic thinking. And I just want to take a moment to remind ourselves of that, because how often in your day do you just find yourself troubleshooting, reacting, repeating, rehearsing the same inherited beliefs, yet calling them the truth, like this person is always this way, And as you know, from being in this space, we live yesterday's thoughts over and over and over. Up to 95% of our thoughts are a repeat of yesterday's. And we're just recreating yesterday today. And one thing that has always fascinated me about wisdom is that, data gathering is a part of the step, but we already know so much. We know how much sleep to get. We know how many vegetables to eat, and I still don't eat enough, and I still don't sleep enough. I know theoretically how to set better boundaries. I know theoretically how to be kinder to myself. And gosh, if knowledge alone could transform us, we would be good. But of course, we know that deliberate creation has to be more than just knowing. And is becoming conscious of those invisible ways that we are participating with that knowing, that we are living that knowing. So that's going to look like our beliefs, our expectations, our emotional rehearsals, the stories that we mistake for facts. And we just believe the world, the job, the role, the relationship just operates that way because that's how it is. You know. And I was thinking about this because I was just observing this interesting scene at work. And I work in a multidisciplinary team in the intensive care unit. And of course, for teams to work, we need different people doing different roles. And there are systems in place. And sometimes for good, sometimes for not good, there are hierarchical dynamics. And when a child is well enough to go out of the ICU, but still too sick to go home, they transfer out and go to another part of the hospital with different staffing ratios, with different level of illness. And so our system is set up that on the day the child is going to leave, we pause as a team. We get together at the bedside. The nurse, the family, if the family is there, participates in this sort of medical handoff where we review the history of what's happened, the hospital stay, the data, what our thoughts are, what our concerns are. And the receiving team does the same. They review it and also help us refine our ideas, etc. So this is like a very routine thing that happens every day. And a lot of different roles and different teams are now colliding. And everyone just wants the best for the child and for the family. And I actually forget the exact details of what happened. It was more the interaction that struck me. And the bedside nurse, we got to this certain part of how the decisions were being made with the family to affect, the rest of the course. And there were some barriers, and the bedside nurse very caringly and lovingly and wanting the best for the patient and for the family made a comment. And it was a little bit related to like the rest of not only the plan of care, but just about the way that the system is with guiding the families through, with parental education, with limited resources. And oh man, it landed in a way that got misunderstood. And you have all seen this happen. It's like a car accident happening in front of your eyes. And you want to intervene and you're not quite sure how, and you're not quite quick enough to help, but you watch it happen as a third-party observer. I'm just watching this person say this comment, watching the receiving person misunderstand it from my assumption, because non-verbally, the person receiving the comment, had the eye roll and the shoulder toss and kind of defensive tone and a defensive explanation. At least that was my assumed bias from my observation. And I don't think that I was the only one, because I think the other people kind of had their eyes widened as well, and the nurse kind of shut down. And the whole time, my mind is scrambling. I'm racing. It's like the cars are about to collide. How do I help them go on their path? And I'm thinking of all these different ways that I could intervene. And my first instinct is like, okay, let's just clarify the misunderstanding. Like, take away the offense. That's seems like one possible pathway. So then my mind started racing to like, okay, well, this is what I think was the misunderstanding, and this is what I believe that person meant, and this is what I believe that the receiving person probably heard, and this is where I believe it could have been offended or offensive. And like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to reverse engineer all of these biased assumptions that I'm making about what all these people think and feel. I have no idea. And I can notice my mind not only trying to reverse engineer it, but then observe the reverse engineering, like, Saidie, girl, now you're assuming that you know what they're thinking and feeling. That's not going to work. So I'm like, okay, at least take the receiving person out of it. Why don't you just defend the nurse? You know her well. I think you understand what she was trying to say. And so how do I defend her? But then is that going to escalate the tension? Because now it looks like there's a problem. And is that going to, call out these relational things or the ways that the system is limited? And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, now you're still making all these assumptions about how people are perceiving the system and perceiving this person. And that didn't sit with me either. And by the time I was finished ruminating on the whole situation, oh my gosh, the whole thing was over. Like, The whole communication was over. The sign out was over. Everyone walked away. That is when I finally had the simplest thought of like, okay, maybe I don't need to assume that anyone's offended. Maybe I don't need to assume that anyone is needing defending. Maybe I can just simply name what I saw from the I perspective. Something like, I really appreciate so-and-so, how invested you are, or how invested I see you to be in this child's well-being, in parental education, in helping the system be at its best. What a great question. And, maybe reflect on how the question made me think about it differently. Like, thank you so-and-so for this question. That really helps me think differently about how we can support these families in such a stressful time. Why couldn't that one be my first thought? This is subtle, but when we create from the I, when we create deliberately what we're wanting to create, which is, I was wanting to create clarity. I was wanting to create connection. Like, I'm just witnessing this potential misunderstanding. I'm assuming someone's offended, someone's shut down. Now I'm creating all these problems. I don't even know if they exist or not. But at the heart of it, what did I really want to create? I wanted to create connection. I wanted to create communication. I wanted to create problem solving. I wanted to create cohesion in the team. I wanted to create like good conflict, like constructive conflict. If there was going to be disagreement, let it be for the greatest of the system, of the child, of the parents. And in a way that it doesn't erase the misunderstanding can still exist. And this is just a point of entry to reconnect, to clarify what is meant. It doesn't bypass that the system is short, that resources are limited, that it's hard to do each person's job. And it doesn't bypass any of that, but it does create a point of entry for like, how can we think about this differently? How can we use each other's expertise in the most efficient way that helps the team, right? It also doesn't pretend that the hierarchy disappears, but it does shift the frame. It shifts the connection of, hey, this person has really valuable expertise at the bedside on practically supporting the patient and the family. And that is what's needed. Like, thank you for bringing up your expertise in your exact role. And the undertone of it all is like, how can I create, instead of from the deficiencies and someone being offended and someone being defensive and this whole misinterpretation, to creating deliberately from shared purpose, best intentions, collective care, each one of our strengths, curiosity, possibility. And this probably resonates a lot with a prior episode that I did on replacing I'm sorry for with thank you for, because it's a little bit of the same idea of creating from strengths-based frameworks instead of deficit-based frameworks. But now the focus is on, I am creating. The question is not, am I creating? I am creating. The question is, am I creating deliberately or am I creating accidentally? Because when I create on default, on accidentally, then yeah, usually I am creating from my negative bias that we all have, from my automatic thoughts of yesterday and how this system is broken and things never work and this judgment of this person, So it's not a matter of if I'm creating or not. It's a matter of what am I creating and am I doing it deliberately? And we're doing this all day long, right? Not just in our workplace, in our relationships, in our teams, in our parenting, in our leadership, in our own identity, in the stories we tell about ourselves, in the meaning we assign to feedback, in the expectations that we walk into the room with. Like, we have expectations of other people. We're just constantly creating, we're creating all the time, but it's usually asleep and unconscious to these inherited constructs and beliefs that we have. Old beliefs, negative bias, and there is so much incredible science that lives underneath all of this. One of the best examples you all have heard of is the placebo and nocebo science. So just stay with me for a moment, because placebo isn't fake healing. It's actually expectancy science. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. I've heard of the placebo effect, but I had not heard of expectancy science. And it's the same idea that beliefs measurably influence our physiology, among other things. And research shows that our expectations can influence our pain, our symptoms, our effort, and even the medication side effects. That positive framing can improve outcomes, that negative expectations can worsen them. And that doesn't mean that like this is magical or we can just manufacture the reality that we want. This means that meaning matters. Your expectation of what you think should happen really matters. The stories that our brains rehearse over and over matters. There's really interesting research, and I'll link below in the show notes that there's research that confirms that we update our beliefs more strongly when the experiences confirm what we already expect them to do or to have on us than when they contradict us. So in other words, like your brain is constantly gathering evidence for the reality it already thinks is true. So if I walk into a conversation expecting this person to disrespect me, you know what I'm going to notice? I'm going to notice the disrespect even faster. If I walk into leadership believing I'm inadequate, my attention is going to start gathering the proof where no one is paying attention to my comments, where my words don't change the conversation, and I'm going to prove to myself that I'm inadequate. If I believe that conflict means danger, my nervous system is going to avoid this person in this conversation even before the interaction begins, the conversation begins. I'm going to dread it. I'm going to find a way to, delegate it or bypass it. So I'm already experiencing the danger before I've even had the danger. And this is the cousin, the sibling to deliberate creation, which is unintentional, unconscious creation, automatic creation, inherited creation, call it whatever you want, default creation. And of course, like our brains are expensive energy beings, and it takes a lot of energy to be deliberate all the time. There is, as you know, survival benefits to having some automatic creation. I don't need to spend energy on the way home when I've taken it 1,000 times. I don't need to burn energy trying to figure out how to get home. So it's not that it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're obviously inviting this conversation into the ways that we want to be. Who do we want to be in this world? How do we want to participate with life? And I think sometimes we believe that deliberate creation means you have to force life. You have to control the way that that person is, the way that my leadership is received, the way that I'm respected, the way that my contributions are valued. You know, we have to like manifest harder. That's not what I mean. Deliberate creation has nothing to do with controlling reality outside of you. It's all about the internal conscious becoming of how you participate inside whatever is happening around you, but you are inside of it. And I also always want to give this disclaimer that there is no blame in conscious deliberate creation. Like, it's not like we're saying, oh, you thought this thing and therefore it happened to you. No, you aren't responsible for creating everything, for creating the system, for creating the trauma, for creating the bias, the isms, the loss, the hierarchy, the injustice. I'm not saying that we are like personally responsible for creating those injustices when they happen to us. Absolutely not. And this is not about pretending that those things just disappear when we reconnect with our agency and our creative power. What this is saying that while these systems exist, while these things exist, that we are recovering our agency even within them. We are allowing ourselves to create some space to connect and to create from our own internal constructs that can support forward momentum, that can support solutions, that can support change in a good way for the whole world, that can support justice, that can support safety and dignity and all of those things. I want to take us even to another layer that lives within mental imagery, because I think this is really interesting, and you probably already know this intuitively as well, that the brain activates these neural networks that are alive and are on when you're actually experiencing something. And some of those neural networks come on and are alive and on when you're just having a vivid mental rehearsal of something. So this is something that athletes use all the time, that therapists sometimes use. Again, I'm not a therapist, that medicine uses, and your nervous system practices the future before you live it when you have a vivid mental rehearsal of it. Why do I bring this up? Because our minds are so active and sometimes we're not even monitoring them. So like, what are you rehearsing? Like, hey, knock, knock, brain, who's up there? What are you rehearsing? Is it failure when I go to serve this person? Is it embarrassment when I go to speak up? Is it scarcity when I believe this thing isn't going to work out? Or what are you rehearsing up there, mental model, when I think about the future? Is it courage? Is it curiosity? Is it possibility? So all of that is important because all of those vivid imageries are overlapping your body's real lived experience, the networks of your lived experience. And that means that you are already creating some kind of future in the present moment, just with that mental rehearsal. So then when that actual future arrives physically in the 3D, you're already a little bit prone. You've already practiced this pathway of failure, embarrassment, or you've already practiced a little bit of this pathway, curiosity, courage, possibility. And so how are you already creating in the invisible plane? And some people would call that, the 5D or the quanta in the energetic emotional plane. And then, of course, we're here, physical beings on this physical plane. So we also have to create in the 3D. So we also need to talk about not just the emotional, deliberate creation, but here, the physical, behavioral, deliberate creation. And we benefit from doing both, right? Both creating emotionally and creating with our actions. This is where goal science comes in, and all of this will be linked in the show notes. But goal science shows us that when you have an intention of a concrete behavior, you're more likely to have that outcome. So we're not just thinking like, oh, I want a different life, but like, what am I actually practicing? What am I actually repeating over and over and over? Not just dreaming about it, but what are my behaviors that are aligned with that life that I want to live? I want to get healthy. Beautiful. Maybe I have a lot of steps to go, but what am I practicing that is in alignment with who I believe that I am? I believe that I am becoming healthy. Okay. I'm practicing noticing the taste of these vegetables. I'm practicing curiosity with these recipes, etc. I'm practicing non-judgment the days that I fall off the wagon. So these are some of the questions that I use to shape Awaken. It's a space that I built around purpose, power, and creation. And they're the exact fundamental tools and frameworks that I used in the first 5 years of my learning about cognitive emotional tools, because we know that insight alone doesn't change lives. So many of these shifts are easier when we practice them in real time, in real life, in the discomfort of them, instead of only just understanding them intellectually when you come in and you plug in, but practicing the cognitive tools, practicing the emotional tools, practicing a living, fluid, dynamic relationship to yourself, to others, to your work, to your family, and to your life is truly a lived practice, a living art form. Not just what kind of life are you creating, on your vision board, but what about the relationships within them? What is your relationship to your career, to your service, to your loved ones? And what kind of ripple effect does that create? Like, for example, like, sure, I would love it if I came home and the kids were patient with me and not pulling me in 10 different directions. And it would be so great if they could just like understand that and just give that to me. And deliberate creation would say, well, how do I want to co-create that environment? Where is it I can be responsible and curious of the stories. And when I come home, be present with them, excited to tell me, and how can I create that space for curiosity and connection, and tell me more about that story, and tell me more about how, what you found in the creek and show it to me, and allowing it to be something from a space that I co-created with, not just I'm waiting to inherit. So it's not just about mindset. It's also about the emotional lived experience. It's also about the relationship I have to my perception as a mother, my perception of my kids, my perception of the stressors of at home, and what all of that means if things fall through or not, and where are my values, and how do I reconnect to them, and how do I get information from them, and how do I restructure things. So yes, it's a little bit mindset. Yes, it's a little bit emotional work. Yes, it's a little bit action. And all of it is in relationship to you and to designing your life and who you want to be and what you want to build in a way that reflects what you believe. And that's what I believe in. I believe in your agency. I believe in your deliberate creative power. And that's how I created Awaken. That's how I created soulSHINE itself. Not just as a program that you consume, but truly as a practice space in community where we practice courage and experimentation is normalized, where we get to play a little bit with our lives and have a little compassion for our lives, where we don't just contemplate these things intellectually. Like, sure, there might be moments and modules and content that is consumed as new ideas, but then we study it together. We deepen the learnings together. We practice that. We bring it back. We explore it a little more. We deconstruct it a little more. Yes, there are concrete cognitive emotional tools. And yes, I guess traditional coaching exploration of thought and real life relational insight into your life, into what experimentation looks like to you. What does agency look like to you? How does your heart and your spirit come alive through these conversations, through shifting how you see yourself, your life? And we're going to take this idea in a companion episode to this episode where we're going to zoom out to not just creating deliberately in our lives, but creating deliberately as a collective. Because I don't think that our deliberate creation is only for us. Yes, it primarily is for us, to us, from us, but we also participate in teams and in communities and collective defaults and culture and shared possibility. And what happens when enough people stop living from the inherited default and start participating with conscious, deliberate creation? And that's where we're going to go next. If this is resonating with you and your big, beautiful brain is like, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't have time for one more thing, I totally see you. And I want you to know that this work and this container was built for busy, thoughtful, usually overwhelmed humans. Not for a perfect routine, not for ideal conditions, not people who are just suddenly like enlightened on a Tuesday. The goal is not overhauling our life. It's so much more simple and so much more profound than that. It is, how do I participate in this life as it is a little bit more deliberately than I did yesterday? And not in an abstract way, because deliberate creation might sound very lofty until you see it in the way that you're responding in the next hard conversation. Oh, there it is. There's my deliberate creation. Who do I want to be in this moment? Do I want to be compassionate? Do I want to be curious? Where is the story that I've practiced 1,000 times about this person and them receiving me? Where's the story that I've practiced 1,000 times that my voice or my input doesn't matter? Those are the moments. What you're already living is literally a rich playground for this work, for these transformations. You don't have to change anything about your life. The change is inside. The change is the way that you perceive yourself and your life and how you want to perceive and participate in your life. And that's what makes this work deeply practical. It's messy life practical. It's relationship practical. It's Tuesday afternoon and I'm anxious practical. And doing this in community is so important. Not everyone is going to process the same or process out loud. Not everyone is going to want to be vulnerable and have strangers staring at them virtually. And part of deliberate creation is honoring your own way of creating. Maybe that's quiet participation. Maybe that's listening and contemplating. Maybe that's doing the work behind closed doors in your own private containers. Maybe that's simply bringing your curiosity. Maybe that's putting away little seeds for later and you're not ready to practice it yet. All of that counts. There's 1,000 ways to practice your becoming. So this isn't about doing it right or wrong. This is about you being interested in relating to yourself and your life differently. So for ending tradition, I want to give you our usual invitation. And I just want you to choose one area of your life, just one. It could be your relationship. It could be a work dynamic. It could be a dream that you have. It could be your body, the way that you talk to yourself, something that is small enough for you to actually practice with me this week. And I want you to ask yourself, what am I creating by default? Maybe it's a belief I'm rehearsing, an expectation that I keep seeing the evidence for, an emotional reality that I'm just unconsciously participating in. And then I don't want you to contemplate it because I think we can go down rabbit holes. Why did I do this? And where did I pick this up from? And I want to understand this. That's beautiful and that has a time and place. But for this transformation and for this invitation, I just want you to choose, deliberately create one new thought, one new behavior, maybe one new emotional posture. So instead of like, for example, being defensive, maybe I'm curious. Maybe instead of, I don't know how to do this, your belief is, I'm learning. Maybe instead of rehearsing, oh my God, scarcity, there's not going to be enough. What if? What if there's possibility? What if it does work out instead of what if it doesn't work out? Maybe instead of waiting to feel confident, I'm just going to love myself through doing it scared. Maybe instead of creating because I have to prove this is going to work, I'm going to create this time from purpose, from presence. And I want you to actually do this in your real life, on your calendar, in the next hard conversation, in that next moment, and just watch what changes as if it's an experiment. See what happens, not because we're controlling the outcomes and the people in the universe, but because you are consciously changing the way that you just participated in your own reality, and see how that supports your becoming of who you want to be and how you want to show up. And if you like that idea and you're not quite ready to jump into the Awaken program, check out this free guided experience called the Mini Awaken. It's short, it's super practical, and it's another container with which you can practice these ideas that we explored together today. We talk about identity and believable thought shifts that allow this emotional participation and allow this deliberate becoming, and what it looks like to move just simply from insight and like, yeah, okay, that sounds fine, into real lived experimentation. Because that's what interests me the most. I don't want to just collect all these concepts and do a lit review and bring you the science and like, oh, that's interesting. I learned something from this podcast. But I want us to live more fully, with more intention, and with all of our deliberate creative energy and power, with courage, with honesty, fully participating in our own lives. So you can find the current details and access information for both the Mini Awaken program and the Awaken 12-week journey in the show notes. And there's never any pressure here. I always want you to honor being exactly where you are taking what serves you, experimenting, observing, becoming. And honestly, that is the philosophy of how I deliberately created soulSHINE itself. Not the content, not the structure, not the belief that transformation is only spiritual or only evidence-based, but both, that we are wholly human, both science and soul, both individual and connected to something larger than ourselves. And those are the foundations of how soulSHINE was built, even down to how the company participates in the world through community and through impact and through generosity. Because truly who we become is not separate from what we create. And whether you stay in this conversation with me or simply carry one deliberate experiment into your week, I want to thank you for creating this space with me today, wishing you to feel supported in this space. And I'm so honored to be a part of your soul tribe. I'm sending you love, and I'll see you next week. Bye.